Hello, and welcome to another fully live episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Kody Kinzie. I'm a security researcher at Varonis, and today I am in fancy Los Angeles with Alex, my fellow hacker.
Yep. Hello, everybody.
So we are here after DEF CON, doing things like nugget wrangling and figuring out what to do after our first time at DEF CON selling these things, and also, of course, drinking Club Mata because this is the only place where I can get it. So
You spent a good $100 on like a case of that.
nobody needs to know about my caffeine habits. But yeah, so it's nice to be back. Alex and I have been doing a lot of fun hardware work and also some not fun hardware work. Alex, you want to talk about what the Nugget news is this week?
Oh boy, there's a lot of Nugget news. Starting off though, we recently got the latest revision of our Nugget circuit board, which is I think version like 3.0.2 in. So there's some key design changes on this one, some improvements, like we added some connectors on the back, so there's interoperability with hardware like Adafruit Quick connectors and SparkFun modules and stuff like that. Unfortunately, a very simple and stupid mistake caused this entire design to not work. If you want to switch over to my screen, we can take a look at what that looks like. So over here on Kody's Twitter, you can see the board a little more close up. So if any of you guys want to try to identify the problem, if any of you have designed circuit boards before, it's pretty readily obvious what the mistake is that I made here, which is the fact that I forgot to include the entire ground plane.
Ding ding, so, as was guessed by our friend Andrew, aka Make It Hacken. So congratulations on successfully identifying why this board will never work.
Yeah, so you can see ground basically isn't connected to anything. I forgot to pour a ground plane. Take a look at the circuit board here. It was a pretty stupid issue. I forgot to hit the letter B for build after creating this pour zone here, and then I just uploaded this to PCBWay without even checking the final PCB. So we got these things in about a day ago. I already placed the order for the new revision, so hopefully we should be able to test that out in the next week or so and see if that works. But very unfortunate setback.
Yeah, so a lot of
stupid one.
Yeah, so a lot of the time, some of our mentors, like MG, of the creator of the OMG cable, will be like, hey, like maybe don't tell people that you've got like a new revision coming because people will like hold off on buying like your current stuff because they're like waiting for this new version. So we always try to be like, hey, this is probably coming in like 8 months or something, because we've been trying to make this very simple change to the board for quite some time now, and all these little things end up stopping us. So if you're a hardware creator, it can be something as simple as using a new type of like decoration. Like we lost 2 generations of this basically to the fact that they were conductive traces that in the end were too easy to short when somebody was assembling the board and ended up causing a bunch of failures. So experimenting with new ideas always can be a little bit painful. And in this case, we had yet another setback. So we're glad that we're being like pretty transparent about everybody about what it's like trying to make, this sort of open source hardware. You can see what we're working on as we're working on it. And, there are a lot of setbacks. So that means for us, we're probably not going to see this prototype for months from this point. So that's a little bit disappointing, but again, just part of like developing new stuff. So
yeah. In other Nugget news, we also got we got a batch actually of these really cool glow in the dark cases that one of our customers sent to us.
Yes.
These are really cool. If you take a look at my screen here, you can see the glow in the dark case in action. It's pretty sweet.
Now, I have to say that of all the different case revisions, these are absolutely one of my favorite ones. I really like them.
They're a pain in the ass to print, though. We did like a Halloween workshop last year where we came up with like special edition Nugget cases. So we had like purple and we had orange. And then we also tried doing a run of spooky nuggets with glow in the dark, but those things
ruin the nozzle.
Yeah.
So the problem here is that when you're 3D printing this sort of texture, like it really wrecks the inside of like soft brass nozzles. So you have to use a hardened one, and that also like it still wears on the other things. If you feel the filament, it's like really like rough. It has like embedded stuff in it that's like quite rougher than the plastic typically is. So I have to say it's so cool that one of our fans like did this. They managed to put this together last minute. And let's see, Weirdo, WYRDOH is the name of the person that did this. And again, we put this on our Twitter. A lot of people were like, I want that. So we're probably going to do a giveaway at some point where we give away a glowing nugget in exchange for like the best payload or something like that. We really want to like have some more spotlights on all the different payloads that people have been developing since DEF CON. A lot of you got your first, Ducky Script attack device, whether it's Ducky Script Classic or the new version of Ducky Script. So yeah. Really exciting stuff. Also, in our own personal news, it looks like we're probably going to be doing some workshops on Hack 5. So if you've ever been looking for like more formal classes for your Hack 5 products, it looks like we're going to be starting to work on that very soon. So we're really excited about that too.
Oh yeah.
All right,
Also, I gotta say,
some
this
new
is a
nugget
pretty
news.
cute counterpart to the blushing nugget. If any of you guys have the heat reactive one.
Yeah, so this is my blushing nugget. You can see that
Oh,
it's
it is
been in my
changing.
hand, so it's starting
Great.
to color change. And our a lot of the cases that we released at DEF CON actually change from purple to pink as you like hold on to them or as the little microcontroller on the back gets warm. So these are the blushing nuggets, and then that's the glowing nugget,
Yeah.
which are extremely cute. So thank you to everybody who's been like submitting like either case mods or like anything else. Like we have I think like almost 1,000 people that now have a nugget of one type or another. And that's really exciting and cool for us because we have our own community that's working on all these creative things. So if you have something cool you've done with the nugget, whether it's an awesome payload, whether it's a modification, please let us know. We're working really hard to make sure the latest version of the software is going to be available for people to hack on and work on. So yeah, thank you to everybody who's been reaching back out to us. It's really cool.
Yeah, I'm also seeing there's some people that are hopping over in the Hack 5 Discord that are already asking questions and making some pretty cool contributions. I was talking to one guy, I forget his handle, but he was making these pretty cool like laser cut acrylic cases for the Nugget, or at least designing them. So I thought that was pretty rad to see that people are already tinkering around with this design. And of course, everything is open source. So if you guys want to find the dimensions or the actual circuit board or 3D renders or stuff like that, all of that is source available. And I'd love to see what you guys create. Speaking of that, if we want to switch over to my screen, I actually created a separate Discord channel specifically for the products that we're making. So I actually put up this documentation site over at usbnugget.com, and this is going to be the new place where our documentation lives and also basically all the resources that you would need to get up and running with your USB Nugget. We're still working on getting that up and running, but if you scroll down here, you can find links to some of our resources, like, of course, our videos, and also the new Discord channel that I just created. So if you guys are looking to get support on your product, if you have questions or want to make any suggestions for new features on the USB Nugget, that would be the perfect place to do that. And you can check that out over at usbnugget.com. What's also really cool, this was suggested by one of our friends, Sean. So this is a static site that you can find over at usbnugget.com on our GitHub repository. So if any of you guys are looking to help contribute to our documentation, it's really simple to get started. I'm going to be posting instructions on the README down here. But basically, you can just fork this repository, make changes to the documentation, create a pull request, and if I approve it, it's going to be instantly rendered to this website. It's really easy to do. So we're looking forward to seeing some of that.
All right. So in the chat, one of our people asked whether or not we are going to do a video on the Wi-Fi Coconut. So Alex, you were asking some interesting questions directly to Daring Kitchen about the Wi-Fi Coconut as of yesterday. Do you want to share your question? Because I think a lot of other people probably have that question too.
Yeah, so I've been messing around with the Coconut a little bit. It's pretty cool and easy to get started with. And I think probably by far the easiest like prepackaged Wi-Fi hacking thing that I've ever worked with. It's just a bunch of Wi-Fi radios compiled into one thing. And the binary makes it super easy to gather reconnaissance and just dump it out into a PCAP file. It is specifically a passive reconnaissance tool, only for sniffing. So I wanted to figure out if I could do, like run a deauthentication attack or something more active. But I noticed specifically in the documentation, it says that you shouldn't transmit from the Coconut. Luckily, I was able to hop on a call with Darren to ask him why that is. And the reason is all the radios are just connected to the same output, so they would basically fry each other. What is cool, though, is using the web interface for Kismet, you are able to mount the Coconut as a dongle to that, and you can do like war driving or that kind of thing. So I think I am going to showcase how to use the Coconut for war driving. So I think it is pretty cool that you get like a comprehensive overview of all of the different Wi-Fi channels, all 14 at once.
Yeah. And there's some automatic things you can do in Kismet to like identify like different types of attacks or suspicious behavior that if it were running on all channels at the same time, like that sounds like a pretty good like Wi-Fi intrusion detection system, like at least like just out of the box using Kismet, which is in my opinion one of the better use cases of this thing so far. So You know, if we switch over to my screen, you can see like this was me after just a very little bit of effort, like on Mac OS, which is typically not the hacker's most preferred supported platform, getting the Wi-Fi coconut working just fine. It was just a couple brew install commands. So I just want to give like a big shout out to the Hack5 team and Kismet for being able to make this so easy to install on a Mac OS system. Because really it was super simple. So if you did pick up one of these, then stay tuned for one of our guides on probably using this with Kismet, because it seems like there's really excellent support for that. And you heard it from us first, probably shouldn't try transmitting from multiple ones of these at the same time, because they may burn out your antenna.
Yeah, I also do have to say, I think it's Dragorn from Kismet Wireless has also put a lot of effort into developing like the new web interface on the Wi-Fi Pineapple. I believe the release is like version 2.1 or something. A really cool feature that was added is color filters, so you're able to filter out like access points and client devices and stuff like that and color code them, which is really cool. I personally haven't gotten to mess around with that yet, but a lot of awesome new features thanks to the guy over at Kismet Wireless. Looks like we also have a question here. Will there be any way to make the USB nugget compatible with the new Ducky script?
We just had literally like a 30-minute long conversation with Darren Kitchen about this yesterday, didn't we?
Yeah. So the limitation to that at the moment, so we're actually still working on fully implementing and bug testing the classic version of Ducky script before we move on to that.
Yeah, one of my friends, Ryan, has been relentlessly saying that like we need to implement like looping, because a lot of you have been asking for some of these like classic Ducky script features that aren't supported by all versions. So like, you know, each Hack5 product supports like a subset of like all the available commands in Ducky script, and we're looking to try to implement as many of the classic ones that are super useful, like looping, for example, as possible. But in order to do that, we're allowing users to basically put plain text into this and then interpreting it on the board. The new version of Ducky script is doing it the opposite way, where you're using like a web interface on your computer to write up the script, and then you're compiling that script, and then you're dropping it on the board. So our task is, in a way, like unique and a little bit more difficult sometimes, because we have like people accessing this via a web interface and typing raw text into something that then has to be compiled into key code and then sent out.
Yeah, well, I would say that like the benefit is ours is more education focused. If you're looking to debug like your Ducky script or that kind of thing, with this, it's much easier. You can drag and drop a file onto it. You can edit it and it interprets the Ducky script live. With the newer version of Ducky script, it's a full-fledged programming language that needs to be compiled basically into like the raw
bytecode
key code. So we're still looking into that.
It's possible, like working with Hack5 towards that goal, that we could do it. But frankly, like I think that, you know, after talking with Darren, like I think that our product is going to be like plenty useful with Ducky script Classic fully implemented for a good amount of time, and it's going to have like a good useful niche. Some things I would like to implement, though, are some of the killer features like OS detection. Like OS detection is super awesome and cool, but it does require like branching in your scripts, which isn't currently supported by Ducky script Classic. So there's a couple things I really wish you could do. But it really comes down to like what kind of features like do we want to focus on. Like there's some other like convenience features that would make this really useful for people developing Ducky script. Like again, my friend Ryan mentioned perhaps using the buttons to step through every line of your Ducky script, so that if you're troubleshooting or something, there's a debugging mode that makes this like a really great educational tool. Like improvements like that, I think might add more to people's ability to be able to develop Ducky script really easily than like putting a ton of effort into doing that. But it is our goal to do that, maybe looking within the next year or so, like look into the feasibility of that. But after an initial conversation, it seems like they're just getting this working, you know, and it's brand new right now on just one product. So getting it working on all these other products is going to take time, and we're going to not be first in line for that, because it's probably going to be like the, you know, the Bash Bunny and stuff that also gets the new version of Ducky script first.
Yeah.
Kind of a long answer, but hey, we're here to give you the details. So, you know, that's why it's great to do the Q&A.
So for some Wi-Fi Nugget news to switch things up, so we decided to basically unveil the Wi-Fi Nugget at DEF CON as a little trial run, and surprisingly, they sold out almost immediately.
Yeah.
Admittedly, we don't have a lot of active resources like in terms of development on the Wi-Fi Nugget right now, since we've been so focused on USB Nugget stuff. I was really surprised to see how many people really wanted to get the Wi-Fi Nugget. So I spent the past week developing some software for it, and one of the proof of concepts that I've been working on is this war shipping demo that we're going to be covering in 2 different videos. Actually, we have like a Redia episode and then also a breakdown of how you can get started using this specifically on your Nugget. So if you check out this repository over on my personal GitHub, which is just alexlynd/ESP8266 war shipping, you can find this proof of concept that works for the ESP8266 chip specifically. So that should also work if you have a Wi-Fi nugget. But the premise behind this is war shipping is an intelligence technique where you can mail like a physical package to a company that contains like a malicious hardware payload inside. And once it's like kept inside of a mailroom or something like that, it can gather Wi-Fi recon, it can host a rogue access point or some stuff like that. So we'll show more of that in the upcoming episodes. But I wrote this proof of concept on the ESP8266, which is pretty crazy for the $2 price point, to be honest. I'm still working on porting this over to the Wi-Fi nugget as well, so you can have, like the classic cat-themed interface and like the gamified interface and stuff like that. But out of the box, this thing has a serial monitor that you can use in order to tool around with this. You can mess around with the rogue access point, check out some of the features and stuff like that. But yeah, you can find the documentation here. We're going to be covering this hopefully soon. And yeah, if you guys have a Wi-Fi nugget, then stay posted for this.
Yeah, that's really exciting because we had to make a decision between whether we were going to pour our development effort into the USB nugget, which is very, very straightforward, or the Wi-Fi nugget, where there's tons of different things we could really do with it. So we decided to pour our resources into the USB nugget, and we just kind of like released the Wi-Fi nuggets we had available just because, we wanted to see if people wanted them. And there was such a good response that we're like, okay, we have to dedicate more resources to this project now that we know people want this. So yes, it's really exciting to see this war shipping thing come out because this was only identified, or the term was only coined in 2019 when Team X-Force Red, I'm not making that up, the IBM security team, they picked that name themselves, kind of coined this term for sending a malicious access point and harvesting credentials by hiding in someone's mailroom. So we over at Hack5 are going to be releasing a video about our experiment into how practical this actually was. And Alex here actually developed the software in an attempt to make a really, really low cost version of this war shipping attack. So it's a rogue access point attack where you send it in the mail, it hangs out in the mailroom, and then boom, it manages to like potentially gather someone's credentials by pretending to be like a guest network, where all you need to do is put your company domain information in and boom, you get access to the internet. If you're new there, or if you're a guest, or if you just, maybe the signal's stronger and your normal company Wi-Fi is not working so well.
Switch over to my screen.
Oh, and also, please, you don't need to donate to us. We don't know where it goes. It's presumably to some like media company or whatever. So if you donate on the stream, it actually goes to like Viacom or something. But yeah, we do appreciate the support. We love you. But over on Alex's screen.
Yeah, so over here you can see a screenshot of the proof of concept. I would have done a live demo, but in order to do that, I have to connect to the rogue access point and my connection would drop. So I just have some screenshots here. This is basically the captive portal that pops up from the rogue interface, which is pretty convincing. And also it's honestly impressive that this thing can host like a full-fledged web server on this $2 microcontroller. But you can see here, this thing hosts a full domain login phishing page here. And then after you capture the credentials, you can use this interface later on once you presumably receive the package back in order to see the different logins that people used, as well as some Wi-Fi reconnaissance from the target company or wherever the package was delivered. So you can see things like the MAC addresses, you can see nearby Wi-Fi networks. And this can basically be used for a whole bunch of other stuff like enumeration or even identifying individual employees and like tracking them down via their MAC address using something like Wiggle. So there's still some other features we're developing once I port that over to the Nugget. So stay posted for that and stay posted for our episodes coming soon.
Yeah, so one of our commenters says, conceivably you could hide that inside corrugated cardboard itself in a package. This is brilliant. Yeah, so actually the original people that did this, the IBM's X-Force Red security team, I'm pretty sure that's exactly what their name is, but I could be, it's close to that. They actually did that, where their device was about $100, but it could be fit inside of like 2 pieces of cardboard and stuck together, so much so that it could be hidden in the packing to look like just extra leftover cardboard or like a separator. Alex's version could absolutely do the same thing for about $10. So since 2019, the cost of this attack has gone way down, and Alex's proof of concept that he's going to be showing off on his video is going to be like a really just the bare components. But everybody who has a Wi-Fi nugget will also be able to port this attack and use it on their Wi-Fi nugget. It would be able to just ship the nugget and a power bank. It would go into low power mode, and then when it senses the target access point, that means it's at the destination, it would power itself up, start doing bad stuff, and then when it came back, the hacker would be able to connect to it and get information about anybody that put in their credentials. So that's pretty cool.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that feature, but it's a pretty crude method of geofencing. It detects when the package actually arrives at like the target company or business by looking for a hard-coded known Wi-Fi network name. It's pretty silly. Also, if you want to take a look at one of my old projects in a similar vein called the ESP bug, which I have on my screen here, the ESP8266 is really small. This is one of the form factors called the ESP01 module. You can see I basically just stuck this thing inside of a USB wall charger with this little jerry-rigged voltage divider here. That's just 2 resistors. This thing fits right inside a USB wall charger, and this thing is gathering Wi-Fi reconnaissance, running DAuth attacks, all sorts of good stuff. You can check out that project on my GitHub if you want to learn more. Super covert.
All right, we have some really good questions, some philosophical ones. With more and more platforms becoming OS agnostic and systems like Chrome OS spreading, what do you think malware will look like in the future, or will it go the way of the dodo in the next 15 years? So a lot of what, that's such a complex question, and it requires a little bit of like foresight into like the way that like defenders and attackers are going to be working. In the future though, like one of the more well-informed speakers I was just listening to was talking like around DEF CON, was talking about how like AI and automation are going to change that entire cat and mouse game once attackers start really using AI in their attacks. Currently, that's not something that's really done. There's little beginnings of it, but like if you have a good education in AI and machine learning, there's plenty of legitimate jobs that make it like, not a good idea to get involved in cybercrime. But in the future, that's going to change because that knowledge is going to spread and there's going to be more people willing to take on sketchy jobs and actually use the same kinds of tools that defenders are currently using to react super fast. So I think the biggest difference in the future when it comes to cyber attacks and that sort of like malicious software is going to be like using machine learning and using AI to adjust at the same speeds that defenders are able to defend at. And that capability of using like the cutting edge is going to be the biggest difference between what we see now and in the future. And ironically, one of the things that's going to push towards that is these like more closed ecosystems like Chrome OS that are not fully open source, or like rather that like restrict like what you're able to do on it like very much, so that they're more protected ecosystems than like these completely open ones that are more vulnerable. So interesting question. And I'm largely parroting Miko, who did a really interesting presentation on this to some journalists who are asking kind of the same question. I would refer you to him. Literally, his Twitter handle is just Miko, M-I-K-K-O, if you want some more philosophy on where this is all going when it comes to attackers versus defenders.
Yeah, I think that was a really interesting piece of insight. I was also there for the talk. He was mentioning like the difference between like, I guess, closed ecosystems and stuff that's like meant for development. And one of the interesting things he pointed out was that like one of the most secure versions of like Windows that's out there is actually something that's running on the Xbox, which I found pretty crazy. But of course, that's not a thing that's meant to be like developed with. It's a product that you're supposed to use. It's a closed environment. So it's typically more secure because you don't have to tool around with stuff as much as you would on a computer. I guess he also pointed out that like closed ecosystems, yes, they're typically more secure for that reason because you aren't able to access like low-level APIs and do development work and stuff like that, which is the reason why largely stuff like, can't think of any products off the top of my head. I guess like the iPad or like some other things like that. Yeah, or like e-readers or things like that where you're not doing like dev work and don't have like exposed endpoints on there. I guess Chrome OS in some ways too, that seems very locked down.
Yeah, it's just kind of like an interesting look at the way that these kind of more closed versions of computers are like pushing attackers to be a lot more clever, because you really can't get away with the same kind of stuff on an iPad that you can on a MacBook Pro. Right. You can't write code the same way, really. Like it's just a different environment, and the restrictions make it so it's a harder attack surface. So that's another really big development in the way that operating systems are pushing security. Lots of fans in Argentina. When are you coming here? So I also met a lot of like security researchers from Brazil while I was at DEF CON, and I just wanted to say, if anybody's in Brazil or South America in general, hi, we know that there's a lot of you, and we'd love to come visit sometime. Maybe during the winter, though, because I was recently in New York in a heat wave, and I found out that my whole body rejects the heat. So maybe in the winter, but if there's any great hacker spaces in South America, like I'm really interested because I know there's a big hacker community down there, and I know a lot of you watch our videos, so it's great to hear from you.
Hey, Jacoby asks, are you guys ever going to release the official development boards for the Nugget to expand functionality or keep that community focused? So the design files for that, they're open source. I'm not entirely sure what this question means.
Well, okay, so one thing that we had to confront at the conference was there was a booth that was about 10 feet away from us that was selling our own design as a kit for like $10 like less than us, or $20 less than us.
20.
Yeah, and they had never spoken to us or reached out to us, but they were, when we talked to them, very insistent that because our stuff was open source, it was fine for them to be literally like eye to eye with us at the same conference, like selling our products, but not, you know, even talking to us basically. So we obviously disagreed about this and had to have a conversation with them, and like it was cordial, but like, you know, they were right. If we make things extremely available, there are always going to be people who are like honestly ballsy enough to just like take it and then sell it directly against us in our faces. And that was like a major discouragement for us to like have our like most recent revisions like completely like out there for people to like take and copy. So yeah, that kind of like we eventually communicated with them, and I think in the future like we and that company will be okay. But honestly, they're still selling our design, and like, you know, like, so that's one thing where when we started out doing this, our biggest thing I think in the future is going to be education and making sure that these are the best educational platforms to learn on, because there's lots of content around it. And it's going to be pretty difficult for anybody to copy that because we're very good at making content. But I would say that yeah, it's been a little bit of an adventure in deciding exactly how much of our source material we should make available for like every revision. Like this one we're not even done with yet. Like if we were to release the board files for this development version that we haven't completed a successful prototype of yet, it's totally conceivable that like this other company or somebody else would finish it before we do and have it available for sale before we're even able to start. Right. So it was, again, a little discouraging, and obviously like kind of abusing the spirit of like the open source community if you're like openly competing with the developer before they even finish the product. But, you know, there's always going to be people that take advantage of like the letter of the law rather than the spirit of the community, and we just have to be ready for that. So that's one thing that I think we learned from DEF CON, and one lesson we're going to have to take into account when we release future board files. Our current version, though, that is being sold in our store is available. It's just like our like bleeding edge, like experimental one. I think we're probably going to hold on to at least until we get a successful prototype.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing is, you can be legally right, you can be ethically right, and this can be completely different things.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's just like you can be legally completely in the right, but if the creators of the open source project like are standing there telling you that like they don't like it, then like you still have a human problem, and like that's not going to go away in like the hacker community where everybody knows everybody else. So just a funny little thing on being like legally right versus like doing the right thing.
Yeah. Maddie says, could you recommend a good budget laptop for starting penetration tester?
Hey,
get you a ThinkPad of some sort, probably a T series. I was looking at L series ThinkPads. They're quite expensive, but ThinkPads would be the best.
Between $200 and $700 will get you a solid ThinkPad, depending on where on the scale you want to go. Like I recently got a ThinkPad and managed to like ruin it almost immediately by like going over my Grub bootloader while enthusiastically installing 3 operating systems onto it. But they're really durable, they're really useful, and generally because businesses have fleets of them and then retire them, and then they're just like there on the internet for super cheap, you can get a good used ThinkPad on a budget that's disproportionately powerful and has been well maintained, which is just a good deal.
Stanley says, how can I sneak source code out of my enterprise laptop, presumably like a company laptop or something? Or I don't know what that means, which is very underpowered to my MacBook Pro undetected.
All right, well, it depends on your company, because if your company uses Varonis, our sponsor, by the way, then they would be able to detect that immediately, and you would probably just get in trouble. There's lots of different ways that companies try to prevent this, because this is technically seen as like insider theft of information. But again, it could just be something that's like, you know, you need to move an email contents and like they don't let you do it. So the only way is to move something over for a file. I'm not going to say that I frequently have to violate like some like forwarding policies in order to like just like print things out or like download like an attachment, but I hear that it happens to some people sometimes. But in general, corporate environments try to lock this down as much as possible. So exfiltrating certain pieces of information will absolutely trigger certain types of triggers depending on what type of information it is. If it's like not PII, like personal information that could get the company in trouble, which a lot of these systems specifically screen for, then you should be able to get away with it. Like, it shouldn't be a big deal. But if it is something that's screened as something that's like highly sensitive, then even downloading an attachment and then like taking it off of the computer via USB might be noted by some of these systems that are designed to protect against what we call insider threats. I'm not calling you an insider threat. I'm just saying people asking similar questions have been insider threats in the past. So yeah, it's definitely a cat and mouse game. It really depends on your employer and what type of information. I would say, especially if it's like PII, like credit card information, for example, or social security numbers, all that stuff is usually going to be flagged in a corporate environment to quite a degree and trackable when it's on a corporate laptop.
That being said, there's also a pretty cool new Ducky script attack called, do you remember what it's called? Keystroke reflection.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it takes advantage of an old feature that was implemented, I guess, in HID devices, where basically things like mouses and keyboards and that kind of thing that you would plug into your computer have bilateral communication. So one of the things that the computer actually communicates back to keyboards is the status of like caps lock and numlock or stuff like that. So if you were to plug like multiple keyboards into your computer and press that on one of them, you would notice they would all like sync up. So an interesting attack that was developed is actually exfiltrating data by bit banging basically the keystroke like of a caps lock button or numlock button or something like that. And the Ducky script, or rather the USB Rubber Ducky, is able to translate that bytecode, save it to its internal memory, and then you can use that later without raising any flags.
Yeah, super, super cool. I wonder if we could do that on the Nugget.
Perhaps.
Yeah, that would be
focused
interesting.
on this comment that says, "Did Alex just say mouses? Lol." Yeah, you got me.
Yeah. So Jacoby was also asking, apparently he clarified, and what he was asking is whether or not we're going to release information about making like a breakout board. Because we have, so on the back of the Nugget, we have these exposed GPIO pins that are designed for people to be able to add stuff to this. So if they want to add like a light strip or a sensor or like an infrared, like blaster and receiver, like we want it to be possible to do that. And on the back, we supply, I think, like 5 volts, grounds, 3.3 volts, and then like everything else you need to do that. So currently also, these pins are a little bit uneven, which makes it a little hard to like stick a board directly on top without having a space or something. But the version that we're currently ordering that should be hitting, it should be the next ones available at Hack5, should actually have a completely flat back to them. So that should no longer be necessary. But yes, we generally try to sell these when we're like able to think about it with a little like pinout for the S2 Mini on the back, because that's really what this is. There's an S2 Mini pinout on the back, and then we have our own custom pinout on the side that's designed to be used with like NeoPixel strips and stuff like that. Just like a popular pinout for NeoPixels at the top. But we should make that available in case anybody wants to add something like sensor related, or be able to expand the functionality of what this does. So that's a really good suggestion.
That is one of the things I should add to the documentation. I guess if you look on the PCB, the silk screen has the pinouts for this little side profile here. You can see it like through the case. If you wanted to look up the pinouts for the S2 Mini, which is the module that we're using, that's also available online. But at some point, I'll put up official documentation for that, and also the board profile if you guys want to create like hats or plugins or something of the sort.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. Do you want to pull up some of the questions from the channel? So frequently we get people who leave questions on our videos, and they assume that they're just screaming into the void, but they're not. We actually listen to all these. So let's go with our first question from the video.
Yep. If you want to switch over to my screen, we can see what these are. So the first one here, it's on my video, create rogue networks on the Wi-Fi Pineapple, specifically how to use the Pine AP interface to run Karma attacks. Hack Talk says, do a video on how to use the geolocation packager. I'm a little bit confused about this. I'm not sure if that's a plugin or something for the Wi-Fi Pineapple. That being said, though, I have worked with geolocation fairly recently with Wi-Fi devices. It's going to be coming up in the ESP8266 port shipping video. I'll look more into this to see if that's a specific plugin or something like that. Not so sure what this question's asking.
By the way, somebody's asking if NordVPN really works. I'm going to go with our audience on this one. You can just look in the chat to see how that conversation is going. I vote with you.
Next question: can Wireshark spot hidden cameras for free? This is a great episode. I think we're almost on like 200,000 on that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So this episode
Yeah.
was an attempt to kind of do the same thing we did with our like facial recognition episode, and I think it really worked. This was a really fun episode to produce. It was a little hard. It took a lot of work, but we put a lot into it. And this actually also generated news coverage where I got to do an interview on CNBC in which my dentist and my doctor both saw. So that was pretty cool.
Nice. Yeah, so Chai Rail says to find a hidden camera, we can scan nearby wireless traffic for devices with MAC addresses, like Sony camera. This is kind of a critical part of the video, but no other information is given on how to get a list of MAC addresses belonging to those manufacturers. Can you put a link to such a list, please? Yeah, so actually I made a follow-up video to this, specifically detailing how you can pinpoint common camera manufacturers like
Okay.
Access Communications.
Yeah, okay, but I don't mean to be rude, but if we switch over to my screen and I'm like, if I just type in MAC address lookup on DuckDuckGo, like it's right here. Like, you know, you can look up like live, like you can look at vendors. I want to look at vendors. Okay, this is literally the first result. So I can just be like Panasonic. You know, like, okay, there's all the MAC address ranges for Panasonic. You know, like it's the information's available, you know?
Yeah, I think the hard part, I guess, is like curating which of those are like specifically, I guess, like Panasonic cameras or stuff like that. But for my demonstration, I literally just like went through exactly that, like a MAC address OUI lookup thing. I compiled a bunch of them, and then I just used that as like a Wireshark filter. So if you're lazy, you can check out my video for how to do that. But yeah, using a MAC OUI lookup tool is highly valuable. I do that pretty much all the time.
Definitely. All right, next question.
Hi, bro. This is from John. Hi, John. How do you put Task Manager on your desktop?
Right.
Yeah, so that's a plugin that I have for Ubuntu called Conky. So it's basically just the thing that lets you monitor network stats, RAM usage, CPU, stuff like that. So if you look up how to install Conky on a Linux machine, you should be able to find documentation for that fairly easily.
Hi guys, I'm new to hacking world and I'm constantly watching Hack 5 videos. Good for you, you should. I want to know if you use a password manager to autofill your credentials, will it bypass a keylogger? Okay, so my hat's crooked. So the theory here is that like if you are using a keylogger, then it will autofill your credentials. And if somebody had put a keylogger on your computer, that would get around it. So that's true, except for one part of the use case, which is when you copy and paste stuff. So if it's a software keylogger, all right, so let's back up. There's two different types of keyloggers. One of them is a keylogger like the OMG cable, where you plug a keyboard into it and any keystroke that's going through it is going to be logged. In that case, then even if you were copying and pasting stuff from your password manager, you would be bypassing that keylogger and it would not be able to see your password and you would be good. Now, if somebody installed a software keylogger, then technically it would have access to the system clipboard. So that means that it would theoretically be able to see anything that you copied and pasted. So if you were able to use the password manager as intended, where it successfully autofilled your password all the time, then yes, you would be immune to that attack. However, it does not mean that people always use the password manager as intended. And I myself find myself occasionally having to like copy and paste something from the password manager because it's just not working as intended. Now, if everything's set up right, then it should be working, but that doesn't mean that everything always works the way that it's supposed to. So I would say, in theory, you should be protected from both hardware and software keyloggers by using like an automatic plugin and autofilling your credentials with like 1Password or something like that. The exception to that is if you're not using it as intended, then you could still be vulnerable to a software keylogger, although I wouldn't worry so much about a hardware keylogger.
Can't find the exact vulnerability I was looking for, and also, yeah, that's great input. There was a vulnerability a while back where autocomplete fields could be extracted from certain like websites arbitrarily or stuff like that. I'll probably try to find it and talk about it maybe on the news segment. But I thought that was pretty interesting because that's also a different thing than using like a password manager, like having a dedicated site like 1Password and like copying and pasting it or stuff like that. It's also, as you know, the browser can also store that information, but it's fairly simple for hackers to do something like manipulate the HTML form, reveal the password, and then basically steal your crap.
Yeah. So one person is asking what my favorite like password manager is. I use 1Password, and the reason I use it is because it's free for journalists, and I'm technically a journalist. So free is great, right? But also I've gotten really used to our ability to like share passwords for business between teams, and be able to use like highly secure passwords that like multiple people have to remember. So our team has actually had a really good experience with 1Password, and they've always been super responsive to us. So I would say, like, for me anyway, I've really enjoyed 1Password. I've also used LastPass, and LastPass was okay, but they didn't give us a free account. So, I mean, either one seems to be fine. I would love to come to Brazil. Tell me about different hacker spaces there that I could visit, and I will consider a visit. I would love to do like a workshop or something there someday in the winter.
Still can't find the article I'm looking for, but I saw an interesting link to.
I don't think you. What are those ads?
There's some weird ads on
let's
Bleeping Computer as of recently.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna switch back over to the questions. We'll start taking them.
That's fine.
Yeah, I just saw something interesting about like enumeration using autofill. That seems like a whole rabbit hole that I could look into now. Autofill seems like an interesting attack vector.
Someone asked me if I got my new Honda car. You know, after we went to the car hacking village and we saw somebody just unlock a Honda with like a flipper, I haven't been as hot about getting that particular model of Honda. So no, I have not got my new Honda car yet.
Cool. So if we want to switch back over to the questions real quick.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So if you switch over to my screen, we're going to be taking some more questions. This is from Brian. He says, can we please get a code that can be used for the Pico with a display that you can use the buttons to change payload? This video has been around for a while. So this was back when we had a CircuitPython implementation, I believe, of the USB nugget, which was formerly called the rubber nugget.
And before that, it was called the S2 nugget.
Yeah. So actually the first prototype that we created for the software was based off an awesome project by Dave, who goes by DBISU or something like that on GitHub. But he made a keystroke injection tool for the Raspberry Pi Pico that works with CircuitPython and allows you to run keystroke injection attacks on it. I don't know so much about the hardware setup. I think you can use like buttons and stuff like that. Presumably, you should be able to port over the code that we ended up writing that supports the screen and stuff like that, since it's still CircuitPython. So yeah, do you have any input on that?
Yeah, so I haven't really worked too much with the Pi Pico because I have the Pi Pico W and I really want them to support Wi-Fi before I like jump into it. It's just kind of disappointing for me to not be able to use the Wi-Fi interface. So I'm waiting for that to be supported on CircuitPython, and that's really why I haven't dove into that yet, but it would be interesting to port it over. Obviously, the Nuggets are preferred platform, but if you wanted to just take the same SH1106 like library and like move it over to the Pi Pico and then wire it up, it should work just fine. You know, they're both CircuitPython devices. The only difference is that, you know, ours has Wi-Fi built in and it's an ESP device. So
Next question.
All right.
Oh geez, forgot about this video. So this is an old series that I never followed through with because we discontinued the specific piece of hardware I was developing for. So this was getting started with breadboards and Arduino hardware prototyping series. Acritus says, where can I find the next video of this series? Doesn't exist. Maybe I'll pick it up at some point in the future. But yeah, so this was back actually when we were working on developing the precursor to the Wi-Fi nugget. Actually, it was called the Hack Hat, which is now confusingly our brand name. So the Hack Hat was basically just a Game Boy form factor version of the nugget. It was like square, it had the screen, it had the button still, and the Wi-Fi microcontroller. Except the buttons were a little bit big. They were through-hole buttons, and it was meant to be more of a beginner soldering kit. Do you mind looking for a picture, actually, if you're on Twitter?
I'm doing something else.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah, you guys might find pictures of that floating around out there somewhere. But initially, that was going to be like our hardware platform for teaching beginners about like soldering and software development and also PCB design and stuff like that, because it was like such a simple design. This was the first video in designing that platform. Basically, like 2 weeks after this, the Wi-Fi nugget design hit, and I pretty much dropped the series, unfortunately. But I could probably pick up this series again with the nugget at some point.
So a couple people in the chat are talking about being interested in car hacking. So Raj is the person who gave me the demonstration on unlocking a Honda using a flipper. If we switch over to my screen, you can see this is his Twitter. So if you want to follow someone who's really cool and really good with car hacking, especially at like describing it, you can literally see like a government official. Wait, who's this guy again? He's the I'm embarrassed. I should remember who this guy is.
The
But
chief
anyway,
guy.
yeah, he's the chief of national cybers right here, is here checking out this car hacking demo. I will remember who this guy is. Chris Ingalls, the national cyber director. That's what I said. The national director of all the cybers. Yeah, so that was really cool. And generally, if you want to see some really interesting car hacking stuff, then you can follow him on Twitter, because I found it to be a very insightful demo, and he was a very cool researcher. So some of my favorite things, getting to meet interesting people at DEF CON, and Raj was definitely one of the most interesting people I met at DEF CON. So if you like car hacking, you want to connect to the car hacking village, then here you go. All right, next question.
Yep. Maddie asks, I know that Linux is the operating system, but is there any specific way to swap between the Windows pre-installed operating system to Linux? Like, how is Linux better overall? Yeah, so I actually had to help Kody recover his computer that he tried to install, I think like 4 different operating systems on.
Linux, by the way.
Yeah. But yeah, you can do a thing called dual booting, where basically like if this was your hard drive and it comes pre-installed with Windows, you can just shorten the partition and then slap Linux on the other half of your hard drive, and you can switch back and forth between them when you boot up your computer. So it's a really easy process. There's a lot of documentation on how to do that online. If you're not looking to commit to a specific version of Linux, you can also mess around with a virtual machine for a little bit. Personally, my setup is dual booting between like Windows and Ubuntu, just so I have like both platforms available. But it's pretty easy.
Somebody's asking me what is in the bottle and saying that it looks like English ale. This is a German energy drink that I first encountered at the Chaos Communication Congress, and since then have been paying exorbitant amounts in Los Angeles to acquire small amounts of, because it's barely imported into the country. It is a source of great frustration and pride for me. So no, it is not. It is not an English ale. It is just an energy drink.
A question from Clint. Do any of you 3D design / print with Linux? Yes.
It's
the only reason I returned to Windows now. Yeah, so I've always been poor. I can't afford any of the fancy softwares like what are they? Like Autodesk and SolidWorks and that kind of thing. So I've been using FreeCAD for about like 4 years now. It's completely open source and fairly easy to use as well as just a general parametric modeler. If you switch over to my screen, you can actually see the latest revision of the Nugget case that I've been working on. So I actually made this now backwards compatible with the Wi-Fi Nugget as well. So no matter what type of Nugget board you have, you should be able to 3D print these files, and it will work across both. But FreeCAD is a pretty great program for simple modeling stuff. There's also some other plugins that you can use with it as well, if you want to do like rendering or like ray tracing or that kind of stuff. There's also some other pretty good toolkits out there that you can directly integrate with. Like I've been using KiCad fairly seamlessly with this, which is also, of course, an open source PCB design tool. You can use Blender if you want to do renders or stuff like that, and Inkscape, which I use mostly for designing graphics or that kind of thing. And then, of course, in terms of like slicing, there's a lot of free ones out there like Kira and Prusa Slicer. But yeah, I've been working almost entirely with an open source workflow and toolkit.
How easy is FreeCAD to pick up?
If you've worked with a parametric modeler before, like Autodesk or like something like that, pretty easy to pick up. If you've never touched any of that before, if you've worked with like Tinkercad or something, there's quite a learning curve to it.
What's the next con that you guys / Hack5 are going to be at? Follow-up question, why is it ShmooCon? So currently the next one that I'm looking forward to is I am going to try so hard to get us to Chaos Communication Congress. I believe it's in Hamburg this year and not where it was last time, which was in Leipzig. So I would really like to go there. And I would also like to like either do a talk or workshop or like something fun. I love excuses to like meet people, and I hate just like participating at a conference if I'm not like doing something stress me out, you know? So like if anybody is going to C3 or if they have any ideas about how we could participate, let us know, because we definitely want to make some friends there and we want to meet people at the C3 conference. ShmooCon sounds fun. I'm going to need to learn more about it. We've actually never been before. So, but I know that the rest of Hack5 likes to go. So I think that the rest of Hack5 might already have plans to go, but as of right now, Alex and I do not. But I don't even remember how far out it is. So maybe we'll go. That actually sounds fun, especially if we can find something to do there. Maybe a talk or a workshop or something.
I actually just submitted 2 workshops for us to the Hackaday SuperCon, which is going to be in October, November, or something like that. So there's a small chance we also might be there. Not sure yet.
Do either of you have a 2600 subscription? You have a 2600 shirt.
Yeah, I have a pretty badass shirt from them. It's a blue box schematic.
Someone asked, do you remember your first hack which led you down the path of becoming cyber wizards? Yes, it was when I couldn't, when I needed to get a job, but the internet company was charging me a $250 deposit to switch on my internet because I didn't have credit because I was too young. So I had to learn how to get an internet connection without being able to actually pay for one because I needed a job to pay for the internet. So I was like put in like a catch-22, and the only way I could figure out how to get a job was to basically figure out how to get an internet connection that would allow me to look for one. So yeah, and as soon as I figured out that it was that easy, I really realized that like hacking was not that hard, and a lot of the rules that I assumed were like only for professionals to attack were actually quite an open question for anybody who was willing to poke around.
Yeah, actually, I have pretty much like the same backstory with hacking, which is like why this is I think why we like initially started like talking about stuff. It was also like Wi-Fi hacking related, and you were like putting out all these like guides specifically about Wi-Fi hacking that I actually used. So back in like middle school, I was too poor to have internet, but I needed to do like homework. So I would basically have to like walk to Starbucks every day in order to just get work done. I eventually got fed up with that. I learned about like Wi-Fi hacking, and I wanted to teach myself. So at some point, I got a Raspberry Pi, I got a Wi-Fi dongle, and then I hacked the neighbor's Wi-Fi and used that.
I mean, I'm sorry, you know got free internet through prayer.
Yeah, yeah, but that's basically how I got started. A related question: someone asks, "What can you do after getting access to a Wi-Fi network / a local area network? What do you do after you break in?" Typically, some sort of enumeration. So I'll scan for what devices are available on the network. I'll see what ports they have open, and if you can do anything naughty to them. In some cases, when I'm connecting to like open Wi-Fi networks, like coffee shops or stuff like that, you might see some pretty interesting things on there, like just open and available printers that you can directly just send random stuff to print to, or even Bluetooth speakers or IoT-enabled speakers that you can connect to and blast music from, which is an interesting story. I'll save for another
time. So somebody asked, is WPA3 really different from WPA2? Yes, there's several advantages to WPA3 that make it a much more difficult target for Wi-Fi hacking than WPA2. One of the biggest reasons is the encryption doesn't allow you to do the same sort of brute force attacks, and even a really terrible password should theoretically allow you the same protection as a really excellent password in this scheme. So that's like a pretty big improvement over the current system where a really terrible password provides virtually no security at all. So yeah, I would say there's a pretty big improvement in WPA3 versus WPA2.
Yeah, one of the biggest things also is like offline cracking doesn't work, which is a huge setback because you would have to be like physically in proximity to the Wi-Fi. It's something due to how the encryption protocol works. Don't know too much about it.
Yeah, so Andre asks whether we want to do an episode on credential stuffing and using tools like OpenBullet 2, which I have never heard of before. So I had to look it up, and it looks cool. It's got a cross-platform automation suite powered by a .NET Core. I don't know what this does. So I'm going to have to go ahead and look it up more before I can actually give you a firm answer on that. But credential stuffing is obviously something that like gets people all the time. The problem is the people in the comments at Hack5 sometimes yell at us anytime we do something that uses like a credential list. They're just like, well, if they have a 13-character long password, this would never work, idiot. And then they like downvote our video and get upset with us. Not that we really care that much about what they think, but it's just like when we do a string of videos that does rely on like credential stuffing, like from a password list that's probable, like people like, they're like, this isn't hacking. So like it's actually amazing that this is something that is like one of the most common ways people actually do get breached. But a lot of our audience really hates it. Like they really feel like this is baby stuff, even though like it's so incredibly effective. So like I would love to cover it. I just think we need to find some way to like let people know how serious it is. Because a lot of the time when we try to cover like very simple like passwords, like spraying, like credential stuffing stuff, like they don't like it. So it's just a weird like thing I've noticed as a content creator is like people hate password lists. They think it's too easy, but like really like they work like very often.
Yeah, I think that's ridiculous. That's like typically one of my first tries, you know, like RockU, or if it's like a Wi-Fi network, I'll try just like a compiled list of the local like cell phone area codes. That usually works. Someone asks, Oh, well, James says, I helped my friend get Wi-Fi Pringles style. It's actually a
Yes.
demo I've wanted to do for a while, creating a cantenna out of random components. Not so sure about Pringles cans, though. I don't know if those are conductive. I know I saw that on Mr. Robot, and that piqued my interest, but it seems like someone might have empirical evidence.
So Clint says, I need to stay in touch with the security/hacking scene more. Can you recommend YouTube channels or websites other than Slashdot to stay up with what's going on? So first of all, I really recommend going to hackerspaces. Like they're like little embassies, like for being able to like see what a city's like, what a hacking culture is like. Like I frankly like get a lot of value out of those. But also like we read stuff on like Bleeping Computer like all the time. I follow a lot of researchers on Twitter that are known for their research on Mac OS, for example, and other platforms where I tend to be like one of the first people to learn something before it ends up on CNN or something like 4 or 5 days later. So and also like if you see experts being like quoted on news a lot for their like niche security finds, like follow them on Twitter. Like you get your own personal feed of like when the stuff breaks, and often they're posting stuff that they're not done with yet, and it kind of lets you like know what's going on on the bleeding edge, which I think is really cool. So that's where I get a lot of my news personally.
Yeah, once you hunt it in, the Twitter algorithm is pretty good. I've been using that a lot for like the latest, well, mostly like InfoSec related stuff. Also, weirdly enough, I've just been like aimlessly browsing on like GitHub, and it's seemed to figure me out. It's giving me like a lot of compiled list of like resources for like beginner cybersecurity guides, or like compiled guides for ethical hacking, or like stuff like that. Those are all out there. Recently, I've also been reading Hackin 9. They mostly post about like the latest hacking tools and like that kind of thing. Of course, you mentioned Bleeping Computer, which is good for like general cybersecurity news and that kind of thing. I've been finding most of my like cutting edge tools and proof of concepts and stuff like that on that website, though. So you guys should check that out.
Yeah, I also want to give a shout out to David Mumball. Like, not only is he like great to work with, and I recently did an interview with him that has done quite well. He also has a lot of really excellent videos, and even some of our friends that aren't that involved in hacking, they just like are more interested in tech stuff, have like seen his videos and used them as like a reference guide for like getting a certification or like learning something. So he's also out there doing a lot of really good work, and he's just like very easy to listen to. All right, so that beeping of my watch means we're just about out of time. It's always like kind of a shame because we start getting our best questions like right towards the end. Like, and I want to stay around and answer all of them. But hey, more incentive to come back and check out our next stream next week on Wednesday. And if you have a question that wasn't answered on the stream, then you can always leave it on the comments on the YouTube video, and we will make sure to break out and answer those next week. I'm going to scan for any like quick questions we could answer.
Should I buy an Arduino if I have a limited budget?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, but honestly, if you're a total beginner, like I still recommend CircuitPython for like developing little proof of concepts and stuff. Like frankly, like CircuitPython's really cool. It's meant for beginners. You can do it completely through a browser nowadays, which I'm going to be doing a video featuring pretty soon. So if you're going to switch, between one or the other, I would say like for a language, and if you're more of a beginner and you don't care that maybe you can't get down into every particular level of the hardware and like do like super like crazy specific things, then like CircuitPython's really great. If you really want to develop like a super specific prototype and you're a more advanced programmer, then Arduino is great too. So yeah.
Specifically, I'd recommend an Espressif board, like the ESP8266 or the ESP32. Those are pretty kick-ass.
Yeah, I would say the ESP32S2 is our favorite board because it supports native USB. The other ones don't, and that can be a little bit of a pain if you're not familiar with command line tools, because it makes like moving files to and from the board a little bit less intuitive. So ESP32S2 supports native USB. It's one of the platform. That's actually the chip that's powering the USB Nugget. So that's why we recommend it, is because you can get them for pretty cheap, just the raw chips. And still be able to do some of the cool like USB stuff. You obviously just don't have like a button screen NeoPixel like in a bunch of breakouts.
Yep. Last question here from James Randolph. Yeah, Arduinos don't do solar charge controlling. You would need an MPPT module for that. Otherwise, you'll fry your board. And also solar sucks.
How do you know about that?
I've created a lot of solar prototypes, but also one of which involved modifying like, what are they? Like those light boxes you see at construction sites that have like solar panels in order to pack your like temperature sensor inside.
Oh,
like
nice.
retrofitting one of those.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
I know. I also feel like our Q&A is too short every time. So Alex here has also been talking about an idea. Haven't you, Alex?
Which I have a lot of ideas. I have too many ideas.
Yeah, so
I
Alex
can talk for hours.
Alex has been talking about an idea about maybe starting to host like every other week or something, like meetup at the local hackerspace. And the idea is like getting everybody together and doing like some sort of like nugget night where you're either like developing payloads or like showing off payloads or otherwise just kind of getting people together that like, you know, tech and developing and hacking and that sort of thing. And we can show off some of the cool stuff that we're working on. And all the people in our community can also show off like all the weird stuff they've done with our products that we couldn't have imagined in our worst nightmares. So if you guys are interested in that sort of thing, like it'd be really nice to start a little group in Los Angeles. I know this area is huge. And there's lots of organizations out there and lots of cybersecurity stuff going on, but it's often not very centralized. So we're looking at doing something over at Null Space Labs to kind of like integrate that. And I don't know, like maybe make it like $20 and like we buy everybody pizza and like, you know, have a little bit of a budget to like maybe get like some cool hardware for people to try out or something like that. Like just an idea, but it would be cool to get to see everybody and like, you know, eat some pizza and like hang out and do nugget stuff. So if you're interested in that, it's something that we've been talking about doing through our meetup group, which is Cyber Weapons Lab Los Angeles on meetup.com. So if you're interested, you can always run over to the meetup group and sign up there, and you will know when we announce Nugget Night. But I think it's a cool idea.
Yeah, people are asking when it will be. Just stay posted on our Twitter. I'll put out the next event whenever that's going to be. So.
Yeah, so tentatively, when is your next event in Los Angeles?
My next one should be the 10th. It's like an advanced USB attack workshop with a Nugget. Going forward, we want to have, as you mentioned, like some Nugget nights and some more just like community events where you just gather in a stress-free environment, talk about Nugget stuff, eat food, get loose.
Oh, sure, yeah. And also, like, Null Space Labs is just a great place to get to know. So if you're a hacker and you want to be around other hackers, getting an excuse to hang out at the local hackerspace and learn some cool stuff is always something fun to do. So check it out. It looks like the 10th of next month is going to be the next workshop in Los Angeles. If you know other people in LA who you think would enjoy it, then you can do that. Alex will be posting the workshop information very soon on Meetup, so you can sign up. And all you need to do is grab a ticket in order to show up to Alex's cool workshop. I probably won't be there, but that's okay because Alex will.
Yep.
All right. So that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank everybody for asking great questions in the chat. It was so nice to meet all of you at DEF CON. And again, thank you to all the people who are now rocking their own nuggets and making cool payloads. I've already gotten a lot of really great suggestions we're going to be talking about in our next round of development, adding things like loop, maybe some like step through to like debug your payloads. So yeah, we're definitely open to feedback. We're happy that you guys are with us on the live stream, and we will see you next week. Oh, and also a big shout out to our sponsor, Varonis, for letting us do this every week. Super cool to get to go to DEF CON and represent them. And it was funny like how many random hackers were like, oh yeah, I work with Varonis too. So very cool that Varonis lets us do this show where we get to just hang out with our friends. So shout out to them. See you next time, everyone. Bye.
Stay frosty.
Stay frosty.